Hey there, folks. Before we get started today, I wanted to say thank you to our patrons. Patrons such as Dustin Miller, Dave Jackson, Ryan Yingling, Poppy the Keaton, Eric Guess, Chris Copleen, Charlie Young, Colby Moyer, Cody Dawson, Nick Fakuri, Chris from A Novel Console, Alex Stallman, and Adam Waddell. These folks are generous enough to support us on Patreon, and if you like what we do, you can become a patron too. Head over to www.patreon.com/pixelprojectradio. For as little as $2 a month, you get bonus episodes, you get voting rights to choose the content that we do on this show, you get our schedule in advance, and more. There is a tier for everyone if you want to support more, or if you just want to give $2, or heck, you can even edit it and make it $1 probably. I don't know. Check it out. You can check all of that out and more at, once again, patreon.com/pixelprojectradio. And once again, thank you for your generous support. Now, let's get on to the show. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Pixel Project Radio. It's me. I've conquered the gyms. I've conquered the Elite Four. Well, there's a certain kind of gym I need to go back to, but we don't need to talk about that today. It's me. It's Rick, your host. Throw me a rare candy, because I'm happy to see you. In case all those really clumsy puns and my guest laughing at me haven't tipped you off, we are talking about Pokemon today. But before we get to that, I just wanted to give a quick little reminder up front, as I am wont to do. Stick around to the very end. We're going to be plugging all of our socials, our Discords, social medias, the new hotness social media Threads as well, as well as reading a review, because we got one of those today and I'm excited to read it. So without further ado, to talk with me today about all things Kanto and Johto, throwing his fair share of Ultra Balls, trying to catch those damned legendary dogs, I am joined today by Jay Davis from Super Bracket Bros, and I'm excited that he's here. Jay, how's it going, man?
It's going fantastic. I am super excited to be on today's episode and talk about one of the greatest franchises of all time. So yeah, I'm pumped.
Definitely one of the longest lasting and probably most ubiquitous franchises of all time too. Pokemon is something that I think even folks that don't like video games know about.
Oh yeah, even if you call it Pokemon, we know what you're talking about. Like everyone knows the Pokemons, what have you. Like it's so ingrained in not just Japanese culture, not just American. Like it is a global phenomenon, truly.
Yes, I am one of the folks that likes to call it Pokemon. In particular, I like to call my team my Pokemon.
You send your Pokemon into battle.
Yeah. It's funny, man. My humor vacillates constantly between like a 13-year-old boy and a dad. It's great.
That's honestly, that's a great place to be. You know, you can appreciate both sides of the spectrum, right?
Exactly. See, you get it.
Yeah. See, we're podcasters. This is what we do. You know, we find humor in the most inane places.
Or we try to anyway. So before we get into the community forum, which again, I'm always excited to do, we're going to give our short TLDR reviews. If you're new to the show, which you very well might be, because Pokemon, you know, we always get some new listeners when we do big franchises like this. We like to give our short, condensed thoughts on the game up front, usually 1 to 3 sentences or so. And then we're going to move on into what we call the community forum, which we'll talk about here in a second. But Jay, since you're the guest, I understand that you've got something you want to share.
No, I'm trying to condense my thoughts here. Immediately, I want to jump into like a huge tirade, so I'm going to keep it short here.
You can go on as long as you want.
Pokemon SoulSilver, HeartGold are definitively my favorite Pokemon games of all time. I will go to bat for these no matter what. replaying them this time around was a tough experience. Well, tough is a strong word. It wasn't the same. It didn't quite hit the same nostalgia as it has hit in other replays. And with all of that being said, 10-year-old me, 14-year-old me, give this a 10 out of 10. Today, I'd give it closer to a 7 out of 10. So that means I gotta give it an 8.5 Ultra Balls out of 10 Ultra Balls.
Thank you. I was gonna go Slowpoke Tails, but Ultra Balls works great too.
That was the one Pokemon phrase that stuck in my head from your intro.
Cool, man. I think we're mostly on the same page here. I'm gonna read a little bit of what I've got, and then we're gonna talk a little bit before we get into the next thing. So here's what I've got. The notion of what makes a remake was at the very core of HeartGold and SoulSilver. Pokemon hardly needs an introduction, and as someone who was the prime demo for the original Gen 2 games, it's tough to overstate their ubiquity in cultures all over. That is to say, when they originally released. I'm an adult man now. The remake of Gold and Silver are terrifically faithful while adding in plenty of quality of life features as well as new features for the new and the old. All Poke fans owe it to themselves to play these titles. I'm gonna be with you, man. I'm gonna give it roughly like an 8 out of 10 Ultra Balls. Maybe a 3.75 out of 5 Slowpoke Tails, depending on the exchange rate. I haven't checked the exchange rate today.
Yeah, say, and what are you feeling, like 9 out of 10 great balls? Is this a 10 out of 10 regular Pokeball or Speedball kind of game to you? I mean, we gotta, maybe that's what this episode is be. We just need to figure out the exchange rate of all the Poke items.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. You love Pokemon? You love Freakonomics? Well, welcome to the new podcast where we talk about the economy of Pokemon. I hope you're ready for this podcast that's been described as middling successful. And why does this exist? So, Jay, first of all, how old are you roughly? If you don't want to give your age, but were you around the target demographic when these games originally released? That is to say, were you a kid back in the late 90s?
So I was born in 1995. So I was perhaps slightly on the younger age for the very first couple generations of Pokemon. And that's why, like, my first, I remember owning the second generation of Pokemon. I don't remember much about them. What I do have a lot of core memories of is the third generation. So that's Ruby, Sapphire, and especially Emerald. Those were what really sparked my love for the franchise.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not that much older than you. I was born at the very end of 92. I do have some memories playing the first gen of games with some cousins of mine, but the first ones that I really remember being special were the second generation with Gold and Silver. So being a child at that age, whenever Pokemon was in its, I would argue, in its absolute prime, I think you will probably agree with me. It's really difficult to overstate just how significant of an impact this franchise had on cultures all over.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And what I was just thinking about, and kind of like, I've been thinking about the game so much, playing it over the last couple weeks, but kind of rushing back into my brain right now is the anime, is watching the cartoon, at that time in my life, it was just a cartoon. It wasn't an anime, but I mean, I don't want to get back into that conversation necessarily, but that, I watched that a ton, and that was, like, these two things like combining, because then like it kind of gives you this frame of reference. If you see it on the screen, you see, Pikachu doing his, ultimate thunder shock against an Onix, which doesn't make any sense, but it happened and and was awesome. You can take that into the game, and then it makes you, you can imagine it, better, and so I think that was a huge part of it as well. But no, you can't understate how, like, the popularity has only increased, right? It has only become more and more popular. They continuously come out with great remakes. Then you have Pokemon Go coming out of, to me, out of absolute left field, and is shocked to me. I didn't realize this. I only played for a year or two. Is still incredibly popular, which was just amazing to me. And just you cannot overstate how popular how important Pokemon was during that era when I, along with you, would argue they were doing some of their best stuff.
Yeah, and just to clarify, I had said that I thought that Pokemon was in their prime, back around Gen 2, Gen 3, that area. To be clear, I agree with you, right? Like you had just said, Pokemon has been growing ever since its inception, and there are more Pokemon games and fans than ever today. No question. But what I meant by in its prime is that these days gaming and really all tech and internet culture is so diffuse because of how widely it's spread. Whereas back then in the late 90s, mid 90s, late 90s, early 2000s, the internet was not a household thing. It just wasn't. So something like Pokemon coming blazing onto the scene, it was so laser focused that, everybody at school was playing it. The cool kids were playing it. The people that were bullied by the cool kids were also playing it. Literally everybody was playing it. And then the card game came out, and just forget about it. It was insane. All this to say, this is a very special franchise to a lot of people. This is I think it's a very special franchise to the two of us too. And we're going to do our best today. We're going to be talking mainly about Gen 2 and their remakes, that is to say HeartGold and SoulSilver, but we're also going to talk about Pokemon as a whole. But before we do that, we have our community forum, which is a new thing from the Discord that I'm super excited about. If you're not a Discord member, check out the episode description for an invite to that. And what we do is I will always post before we record episodes well in advance and let folks know, hey, if you want to say anything to have it read on the show, your thoughts, opinions, feelings, what have you, type it in here, and then I read them, which is what I'm doing now. So I want to get through a couple of these because we got a couple of nice responses. First up, we've got Chris from a Novel Console podcast, Discord regular and a great guy. Here's what he has to say. I beat Pokemon HeartGold about 2 years ago, and I had a very not good time. So we're starting out great here. The game is not to blame. I am an old man who is accustomed to Pokemon's new mechanics like the EXP share device. I'm going to put a pin in that. That's not to say the game is bad. Far from it. It is, in my opinion, the best executed version of the Pokemon formula. I absolutely loved taking on the gyms, fighting Team Rocket, exploring Johto and Kanto, taking down the Elite Four, and in the end throwing hands with Red. It is a fantastic game that to me felt incredibly tedious many times. It is a must-play for fans of the franchise as well as newcomers, since second gen is the best gen. Jay, I don't know how you feel, but I agree wholeheartedly with everything Chris said here.
Yeah, I remember I am also a member of your Discord, proudly, and I read this a few days ago before we started to record, and I was disappointed at how much this resonated with me. I didn't want to, but I really appreciate what Chris said. And yeah, I agree as well. It just definitely felt, and I even tried to mix up this playthrough as well. I tried to do, implement some like tougher rules on myself, not quite Nuzlocke style, but something a little bit more custom for me to try to make my experience more enjoyable. But yeah, it's a little tough in 2023, compared to what we have today.
Absolutely. I don't want to get too in the weeds with the discussion here, just because I want to. A lot of these folks are going to be saying similar things. With apologies, I'm going to move on to the next responder, who is Dave Jackson, because this is Jeopardy. Who is Dave Jackson? He is the host of Tales from the Backlog and one of the hosts of a Top 3 podcast. 2 great shows. Here's what Dave has to say. Pokemon Gen 2 will always be my favorite. It was the first midnight release I ever went to. I wasn't allowed out that late as a kid. It was the last time I completed a Pokedex, and the reveal that the game didn't stop at the Elite Four blew my 13-year-old mind wide the fuck open. That being said, these are hard to go back to, including the HeartGold SoulSilver remakes. People talk a lot about how the series hasn't evolved, and there is truth there for sure. But the quality of life that's been introduced along the way, like full party EXP share and general pace of play increases, has made it hard to go back even a few generations, even if it's a remake of my favorite. I keep telling myself I'll go back and try SoulSilver again, but I rarely make it further than the Pokemon Tower. There are a couple more, two more to get to, and we can maybe pepper those in throughout the episode actually. But I want to talk about this EXP share thing because it's come up twice in a row, and it's something that I found myself missing quite a bit in this playthrough, and that's something I never thought that I would say, because I grew up playing these games like you have, and when they first introduced the EXP share that made it such that all of your team got EXP for battling, the Pokemon that battled, the Pokemon that battled got a little more, but your whole team got experience. I remember thinking that it was cheap, but now as an adult, as somebody that likes to have like multiple teams going at a time, man, did I miss that. And man, did it make this just a bit of a slog to play.
Yeah, no, I agree. I realized how much I like having different teams to be able to use. So when I originally played these games and I had gobs and gobs of free time, I think I beat the Elite Four hundreds of times. And I took the same team of 5 through there every single time, at one point it got down to 1 Pokemon. And then I think in this game, you get the experience share, but it's an item that you have to give to a Pokemon, correct? And so I would give it to a single Pokemon, take them through to get them up to level 50, so that I could take that Pokemon back to the Pokemon Tower, or use it in the challenge circuits. But I don't have that time anymore, and I want to use more Pokemon than 3. So yeah, I feel that.
Absolutely. So we do have 2 more. I'm going to save them, actually. I'm going to pepper them through. That's what we call in the podcast business. We call that a tease, ladies and gentlemen. We're doing a little tease here. little tease in the Pokemon episode. Who saw it coming? But before we get into the Poke Talk, we just want to make a couple of disclaimers right up front. First of all, like I kind of alluded to, we're going to be talking about Pokemon broadly, but specifically, we played HeartGold and SoulSilver for this episode. So Gen 2 / Gen 4 / remakes in general are going to be kind of the focus here. And the second thing that I wanted to just gently state up front is that we know that there is a bustling community of folks that take the competitive side of Pokemon very seriously. I think we've even got one in our Discord. Shout out to Whooper, appropriately named Whooper. And it's not that we don't care, but at the same time, we kind of don't care. No, I'm just kidding. I'm being a little bit dramatic. Jay and I talked off mic in the green room. We're not those kinds of folks. We don't know a ton about the competitive scene. So if you're looking for like a hardcore competitive analysis, you might want to go elsewhere. We're largely going to be talking about the genre, the games, the franchise as a whole, our feelings about it, try to be entertaining. But if you're really looking for somebody that knows their stats, their EV strategies and such, no hard feelings if you want to press stop right now. Although you better not.
Not at all. Yeah. Sorry, I don't have any stock in this. As far as I can tell, you can press stop. Just skip to the part where I show my stuff. But for Rick, no, please don't stop.
All right, that's it. I'm going to pay you half what I'm currently paying you to be here.
Wow, $0 off of $0. What? How could you?
So it feels a little bit silly, but let's talk about what Pokemon is. I mean, there might be some folks out there that have never played this game or any of these games. So what is Pokemon? Pokemon is a JRPG at heart. I mean, it is a JRPG. It's aimed at children. And instead of fighting and defeating monsters yourself, you are collecting monsters by catching them in the wild, training them, and then battling other monsters that other people have caught and trained. It's cockfighting, but fantasy.
Oh no.
Yeah. Oh, dude, we lost the PETA sponsorship a while ago. It's fine. No
Dang
worries.
it. No, not PETA.
But that's what this game is. It's dually focused in a collectathon style of play, wherein you're encouraged to collect as many different Pokemon as you can, as well as a standard JRPG style of play, where you go from one map to another, one town to another, defeating progressively stronger enemies, and in the case of Pokemon, going through and battling 8 gyms, and then like the super bosses of the gyms, the Elite Four. That's kind of the gist of Pokemon. Would you would you add anything to that, Jay?
No, I think you nailed it there. Yeah, you go, you collect. I mean, that's always the allure for me, is the collectathon aspect of it. So, yeah, I think you covered it.
Oh, that's so interesting. I have always been on the other side of that fence, wherein the collectathon was kind of an afterthought to me. And I like what I always did was, when I was a kid, I would, make parties with as many legendaries as I could, and just only the strongest, only the third evolutions. But these days when I play, it's like I catch and train the Pokemon that I like. I feel very much like the Marge Simpson clip where she's just like, I just think they're neat. Like, that's kind of how I approach Pokemon.
Oh yeah, 100%. That's where I'm at, and that's, I mean, I guess I've kind of always been that way, because like I wanted to, and like I said, I'm not a competitive Pokemon guy, but I always liked being able to take different teams into the Pokemon Tower, and to be able to go into the battle resort, or whatever that version of the post game is for the Pokemon game. That was always my goal, and to be able to take as many different Pokemon there as I could, because I always loved tinkering with typing and teams and things like that, or playing duos or trios in the later games and things like that. Like, that was absolutely my jam. I love that stuff.
Well, since we're both kind of approaching this in the same way, we like to experiment with different types, and we like to train up more than just the 6 allotted team slots that you get. Do you want to talk a little bit about the teams that we used this time? What kind of Pokemon were you rocking on this playthrough?
So on this playthrough, I did something different than I've ever done before, and I decided to try and use only gift Pokemon. So only Pokemon that you were given by another NPC. So that included, obviously, the initial starter. So I started with Feraligatr, Croconaw, Totodile. Holy smokes. I can't believe that escaped my brain. I remember the second one before Totodile. I started with Totodile, and then I received the egg Pokemon. We were running Togepi. We were running together for a while, but Togepi fell off pretty quick. Then at some point I was gifted this was one thing, is you're gifted a Spearow, or you're tasked with taking that Spearow to a friend of a friend or something like that, but you can just not give the Spearow to the friend. So
Grand Theft Pokemon.
Yes, I did. I 100% stole that person's Spearow. But and I also earned a Dratini from, this is a little bit of flex of the rules, but I played the Voltorb game, the gambling, the casino in one of the cities you can go, and I just played Voltorb Sudoku for several hours in order to get enough coins to get a Dratini. That probably makes up a good chunk of my playtime this time around. So I had a Dratini, a Totodile, Togepi, Spearow, which I evolved into Fearow, and that was it. I also had a Machop that I caught and used as an HM slave, so he just had everything to be able to maneuver around in the world. But yeah, that was my team, and I'm pretty proud of my Totodile. I gave it an Everstone. It's still a Totodile, and I'm rocking it. Yeah, I've never done that before too, so it's a good time.
Oh wow, you really went hardcore on this playthrough, huh?
I tried to. Yeah, I wanted to input a little bit of challenge, and I lost to some gym battles. Like, I definitely ran up against some difficult foes where I had to go and retool my strategy a little bit and how I was going to approach it, because I was also, just for the sake of my own sanity, I was running away from a lot of wild Pokemon battles just because they were getting derivative for me. And so like my Pokemon weren't as strong as I'm used to them being by the time I get to a gym leader too, because they fought less. And so it was definitely tougher. And so I will say it definitely worked. I definitely enjoyed the tinkering with like the battling part of it, of battling gym leaders specifically. Everything else was still easy as pie, but yeah. So that was my team of 5, and Machop and Togepi, were pretty useless. So it was really Fearow, Dratini, and Totodile.
I'm a big fan of Dratini. I've always liked Dratini a whole lot.
Mm-hmm.
Even before I realized that dragons were completely overpowered in the first generation of games.
Yes, that also was very helpful. As soon as I realized how powerful Dragon Rage was compared to every single other move that all my other Pokemon had, Dratini quickly became my number one.
I didn't have any dragon types on this playthrough. I think I'm going to try and recall all of my team here, but I know I'm going to miss some because I always rock with at least 9. With this game, I was trying to keep it around there because, again, you don't get that good EXP share. Like in some of the later games, like X and Y, I think they have it, like where everybody gets it. Man, I'll have 2.5 teams going at any given time. But this time, let's see, I picked Chikorita, so I was going with Meganium once it was fully evolved this time. I had a Haunter. I couldn't trade it to anybody for a Gengar, but that's okay. I like Haunter. Let's see, Sandslash. I was rocking a Sandslash. I like Sandslash. Muck.
Mm-hmm.
Big fan of Muck. Like Muck. Let's see, who else did I have? Electrode. Pretty sure I had an Electrode.
Nice.
A Staryu that I was waiting to evolve to a Starmie. Never quite got there for this playthrough. Gee whiz. Noctowl. That's another one that I had. I was trying not to use Pidgey because I use Pidgey like in every single playthrough all the time.
One. Yeah.
I think my HM slave this time around was Krabby, who knew like cut and surf and strength.
Oh, not Krabby. Krabby's cool though. Oh man.
Once I caught a Staryu, I was like, okay, this is my new water slot.
Yeah.
I know I'm forgetting a couple, but that's all for now. And to end on this, right before we go into like some more history, who's your favorite Pokemon of all time? I've said it many times on this show, and I'll say it again. Since the day it came out in the first Pokemon movie, it's been Mew ever since. I love Mew.
No, I definitely respect that a lot. My favorite Pokemon actually comes from Gen 4, and that's Lucario, and has nothing to do with the actual Pokemon games. It comes from Smash Bros. 100%. I loved using Lucario in the Smash Bros. Games. I loved his unique ability where he takes more damage and then doles out more damage. And so, like, I ended up maining Lucario there, and so thus then he eventually would always make it onto my teams in the actual Pokemon games. So yeah.
That's so interesting. I'm sure Mikey from Big Drink Energy is listening and like just shooting up in his seat. Because Lucario is, I mean, forgive me, Jay, but Lucario is one of the lowest tiered Pokemon or fighters in Smash.
I know. I completely and 100% recognize that Lucario is not a top tier Smash combatant. But I love the mechanic. It's not great for consistent wins, but when you do, it feels so good. And the save is unwieldy and it's not the best, but it's just, it was the one that latched onto me back in the days of what was it? I think it was Brawl on the Wii. I think that was when he was first introduced, and that was my jam and has been ever since. And maybe it's just the look in the eyes of all my friends who hate when I play Lucario that keeps me going. But yeah, so Lucario is absolutely my favorite starter. Would definitely be the Mudkip line all the way up to Swampert. So that definitely deserves an honorable mention. But yeah, Lucario's number one for me.
Yeah, I don't have much room to talk. I main Incineroar in Smash, and he's like a solid C tier. Like, he's not great.
Incineroar is fun to play with, though. Another one that can be a little frustrating to play with because he's deceptively strong and just huge power. But not competitive Pokemon, not competitive Smash player either. I will not claim that.
So let's talk a little bit about Pokemon as a franchise and how it came to be. So this was created back in the mid-90s. The first games were finished at the very, very end of 1995. And the whole franchise itself was created by a man named Satoshi Tajiri. He, as a child, really loved collecting bugs, which is largely what influenced this whole collectathon aspect of Pokemon, where you're catching all of these monsters. Interesting, too, because bug types are always the first that you get and almost always quickly become very obsolete in these games. Even though I always make an effort to try. Always. But this time my Spinarak or what's the next one? Ariados got phased out pretty quickly.
Ariados is such a cool design, though. It's always so sad when the bug Pokemon get phased out, but they are a lot of fun. I always had an affinity for Beedrill, honestly. You know, I'm not one of those Butterfree stands, but love me some good bug Pokemon.
I was literally about to say I was a Butterfree kind of guy myself, but now I suppose I'll keep that to myself. So this game actually released before the anime, which is kind of mind-blowing to some people. This game came out at the very, very... Well, no, it came out at the very, very beginning of 96, I think in February. The original goal was to get this out before 1996, and it was finished, I think, in December of 1995, but they missed the deadline to actually push it into production. It's interesting, too, because in 1995, 1996, the Game Boy was already several years old at that point, and many folks, didn't think that this would succeed. Nintendo included. I read somewhere that the media largely didn't ignore, but they didn't really give a ton of attention to Pokemon because of the Game Boy's age and because Nintendo themselves didn't really believe this would, be a huge success. And man, hindsight is 2020, huh?
Yeah, wow. And now I can't even place myself in the time frame or mind set of Pokemon not being literally one of the biggest franchises and multimedia franchises on the planet. But yeah, I guess statistically wise, you look at the age of the Game Boy, you look at the fact that it didn't make it in time for Christmas, those sorts of things. And honestly, you're right. Hearing that the anime came after the game is kind of shocking because it feels like the anime establishes and then helps sell the game, right?
Well, yeah, down to I think the very first episode had the Pokemon Game Boy intro worked into the show,
Wow.
with that Jigglypuff fighting that Nidorino. That's burned into my brain. And it's interesting, too. I remember this so specifically as a kid, and to this day, I don't exactly know how this came to me because I was not somebody that was allowed to just sign up for magazines as a kid. My parents saw that as a waste of money because they didn't like Joy. But I remember getting a VHS of well, yeah, you gotta listen, we cope how we can. I remember getting a VHS of Pokemon in the mail, and it was like a promo VHS of Pokemon. It had landscape style. It had Ash, Misty, Brock all running. Oak was in the background. Pikachu was there. And the first thing I remember thinking is what is that fat yellow thing? Because this was before they skinified
Colorized.
Pikachu.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah,
yes.
No, fat,
yeah, that too.
Fat Pikachu for life. And then I remember thinking oh, Brock doesn't have any eyes because, his eyes are always drawn as just, being closed.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's closed because in the show, he opens them sometimes for dramatic effect. I don't know. Anyways, I remember getting that. We popped it in. I watched it with my cousins because we had been seeing Pokemon at the Kmart's, in the game section at Kmart's. Walmart wasn't in our town at this time. And we just thought that this was the coolest thing ever. So me and my cousins, I had two cousins, me and my cousins Tim and Jeremy, we all got Pokemon Red and Blue. I got Red. I forget which two they had, but the three of us played constantly. Like I'm talking religiously every time. Our moms wanted to talk because our moms were sisters. That's how cousins work. I would go over there with her and we would just play all the time. And it worked out great because there are 3 starters, 3 of us, 3 evolutions, 3 of us, 3 legendary birds, 3 of us. And it was great. And I really cannot emphasize enough how like foundational this was, like, to me as a child. It was absolutely incredible. This was our personality as children.
Well, yeah, and then you throw in, I mean, you get into slightly later generations and you're talking that you can trade Pokemon with each other. Like, I just remember being just gobsmacked when the DS came around and, like, I didn't have to put a link cable between my Game Boy SP and my brother's Game Boy SP to be able to trade Pokemon back and forth. Like, it was instantly, we need 2 DSs, we need both versions of these Pokemon. Like, it was designed, it's hard to not say it was designed for, like, 2 people to have both and to be able to go back and forth. And even if you're not a battler, just trading Pokemon was so exciting. Like, it was just such core memories right there for sure.
Yeah, and you had mentioned training and it being sort of designed in that way. One of the hallmarks of Pokemon is this notion of gotta catch 'em all, right? It's the tagline. Even though the games are fundamentally designed around battling and progressing as a trainer, the spirit of Pokemon kind of has always been this collectathon element. And the way that Game Freak, who is the publisher of these games, the developer of these games, the way that they handled this is they made what's called version exclusives, and they also made evolutions that can only be obtained by trading. So originally, Pokemon came out as Pocket Monsters in Japan as red and green. There was a red version and a green version. The red made it over here, but they replaced green with blue. Blue also came out in Japan. I don't quite remember the differences off the top of my head, but in each version, you're going to have version-specific Pokemon that you could get. For example, one game might have Mankey, this fighting ape Pokemon, and the other game might have Growlithe, who is a dog, a fire dog. And the only way that you could get both of those would be to trade. You have to catch the one that's in your version and then trade with your friend to get a new version. The evolutions that evolve by trading, as I mentioned before, usually just is exactly that. In Gen 2, you would have to trade while they were holding an item, but we'll get there. In the originals, you just traded, and then boom, your Haunter evolves into a Gengar, or your Machoke evolves into a Machamp. And it really promoted this idea of, like, yes, these are video games, and yes, that's going to mean your kids want to stay inside more, but we're inherently putting this interactivity, this social element into our games to, keep kids playing together. And as a teenager, I remember stumbling across this thought and thinking, that's stupid. And now as an adult, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, that's brilliant. Like, what a fantastic idea that was.
Yeah, it's fantastic. One, great job, Pokemon. You're the richest franchise ever. You did it. Like, one, business-wise, man, genius. That's like, like action figure, like Transformers, Hasbro kind of like genius levels of marketing right there. But also, yeah, like, genuinely, like, this was the relationship I had with my little brother for the longest time, was being able to play Pokemon with him, so it's a good idea. And it's very much like, in the vein of like trading cards, right? Which it's literally in the name, right? Trading cards, right? And it's Pocket Monsters. And of course, then you have Pokemon actual cards, right? And so it just all blends together in this perfect way. And genuinely genius idea business wise, but we saw the benefits of it, and oh no, I have to buy another video game to like access this part of it, like shucks, and so like it but yeah, no, I have genuinely a lot of good memories of playing this game and trading back and forth with my brother to be able to complete our Pokédexes and battling and was secondary, but I really loved I really loved the games in which you could team up together, that you could form your own duo team and go into challenges together. Like that was always genuinely a good time too. But yeah, like this was evolutionary at the time, like there wasn't at least in my memory, I didn't play anything like this at that time.
Yeah, this wasn't the first collectathon style game, but I think it is not a stretch at all to say this franchise is what popularized collectathon style games. Because again, everybody was playing this. And you mentioned the business decision aspect of the version exclusives. Yes, I came off maybe a little bit too starry-eyed, but yes, it was ultimately a business decision as well. And then you would eventually get what happened, like with me. Eventually, I got a Game Boy Advance, and then my old Game Boy Color. Well, suddenly I have two Game Boys that I can trade back and forth between. Now I just need to buy another game, and boom. So. Yep. Kind of cheating.
No, I did the same thing so many times. Whenever my brother would fall off a Pokemon, then like it was just me sitting there with both of our DSs, like trading back and forth, like a madman. Yeah, 100%.
Now that we've talked a little bit about the series as a whole, again, we're not going to go into the crazy specifics of the whole series, but now that we've done a little bit of a primer, let's talk a little bit about Gen 2 and the remakes in Gen 4. But first, we do have, as I mentioned, 2 more responses to read from the community forum. That's right, the tease is paying off. First up, we've got Colby Moyer from the Switch It Up podcast. He's an avid Poke fan. Here's what he has to say. He says, Pokemon HeartGold and SoulSilver was a pipe dream as someone who wasn't alive for Gold and Silver in the late 90s. Oh, jeez. 2 gens, 16 gyms, great story for Pokemon, and 1 epic final battle. Was everything both 8-year-old Colby and 22-year-old Colby could ask for out of this series. It's not my personal favorite, but it stands tall in my mind, and if it is your favorite, I can absolutely see why. Yeah, I mean, that is crazy, and he is exactly right. They've all touched on this epic final battle that we will get to because it's genuinely maybe the best moment in the entire series. But we're going to end with Chris Copleen from the Retro Hangover podcast. And here is what he has to say. He says, I've only played the originals, that is Gold and Silver, and that was a long time ago. So what I remember is that it was a Pokemon game. That's not to speak ill of them. They were a lot of fun and probably the most fun I've had with Pokemon ever. I will speak to how big of a deal it was when they came out, though. I was in Tokyo a short while after they had been released there, but before it came out in the United States. In the morning, my father took me to go see an event for the Emperor or one of his family members. I remember for a birthday, but that doesn't exactly check out. And afterwards, we went to the Pokemon store that was down the street. The line to get in went for blocks, and it was to get the new games. One of the ushers, who was younger, even commented on how people were more excited to see, quote, the little yellow Emperor, meaning Pikachu, instead of the real Emperor. And it felt like there were more people there too. Of course, I got the game and played it a bunch on the way home before getting the North American release a few months later. Yeah, that's really cool that we've got someone in the Discord that was in Japan at release of these games. That's incredible. I genuinely can't imagine. I know that it was every bit as big there, perhaps even more so than it was here in the States.
Yeah, no, that's an incredible story and makes perfect sense. Like, that like tracks exactly kind of what I would imagine, but I just can't. I I can't imagine being there still, though. Like that's just such an incredible experience and such a unique experience to be able to like go to Japan and like experience that, that uplift and that excitement for the game, in like its homeland. Like that's just a legitimately really cool experience. I love that a lot.
Yeah, definitely a goal of mine to go to Japan, period, but also to explore, any kind of Pokemon stores that they have there. Maybe in the future, who knows?
Live Pixel Project Radio from the Pokemon store in Japan.
Yeah, on site. We're going on site, baby. It's because we care. We care about the listeners here at this show.
Exactly.
So let's talk a little bit about Gen 2. That's right. This is the second generation of Pokemon games. Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow, which was the special sort of mid-release between the first two gens, the 1.5. They had come out already. The original Gold and Silver, as I mentioned earlier, as I stumbled over earlier, the games are all developed by Game Freak and published by Nintendo / the Pokemon Company. This one, that is to say Gold and Silver, Gen 2, they were released in November of 1999 in Japan. October of 2000 is when we got them here in the States, and April of 2001 is when Europe got them. These were designed for the Game Boy Color and first showcased in November of 1997. Game Boy Color, this was a huge deal. So this is Nintendo Month on the show. We just did an episode on the Nintendo Game Boy, which at the time of recording is almost out. It's going to be out tomorrow at the time of recording. And it's really, really, really hard to overstate what a big deal this was. Seeing Game Boys in color for the first time. Up until this point, we had the Game Boy Pocket in the States, which was black and white, and the original Game Boy, the big fat boy, which was like a green and black tint, like that dot matrix style display. Not these. These were in full color. So for the first time outside of the anime, in our hands, we were seeing our beloved Pokemon, our Pikachus, our Mr. Mimes, our Dratinis, all in full color. And it was incredible. They marketed this hardcore too.
Oh yeah, I don't doubt it whatsoever. Like I don't know if this is an over-exaggeration, but historically it feels like, as a person who loves video games, like this is like black and white TV to color TV. This is black and white video games to like in the palm of your hand, right? It's something that's really easy to take it for granted, especially as like, you have so many incredible games that you can have on your phone, but, like then, gosh, like I can't imagine like the excitement and like the ramp up to something like that is just incredible.
Oh, absolutely. And I know that can feel like a silly comparison to say out loud. Like it's like going from black and white TV to Technicolor. And it maybe feels that way just because it is black and white to Game Boy Color. But listeners that maybe weren't alive back then, that are maybe a little younger, I promise you, Jay is spot on. Like it was really a big deal. Toys R Us marketed the color like crazy. They marketed Pokemon like crazy. Even Kmart in my town, middle of nowhere, was marketing wildly. It was incredible. But the second generation added some neat little new features to the game that were not present in the first one. They added a time system with an internal clock, which looking back,
wow,
for a game, late 90s, early 2000s, that's kind of nuts.
Yeah. If you would have asked me before, like I got ready for this episode, I probably would have said that might have been like a remake feature, honestly. But that's incredible.
It blew our minds as kids that like, oh, you mean if we play in the morning, we can get different Pokemon than nighttime?
So
insane.
Cool. So
and
cool.
Back then, I don't mean to like get all Cranky Kong or anything or Abe Simpson, but like back then we tied an onion to our belt. But back then we couldn't cheat the clock like you could on a like a Switch, like with Animal Crossing. I know that's popular to do. You couldn't really do that. Normal people, I should say, could not really do that. So we had to get up early. We had to walk through 15 feet of snow uphill both ways to catch a Spheal or no, that was Gen 3. a dugong, a cloyster, whatever.
Yeah.
But the clock was wild. They added berries to the game. just that you can feed Pokemon, self-explanatory. Held items, items that you can give your Pokemon to hold. Specialized Pokeballs, such as the Fast Ball or the Lure Ball. They added the Pokegear, which was like a little hub. It was kind of like a pre-smartphone smart device in your Pokemon game. You could do rematches with trainers, which was huge for training. New rare Pokemon and rare Pokemon mechanics, such as the 3 legendary dogs running across the map. Shiny Pokemon, which I think were introduced in one of the Pokemon movies, but don't quote me on that. They added the Steel and Dark types. Partly to, differentiate and, add variety, but also because like Psychic was wildly overpowered in Gen 1, and new moves as well. They added breeding, and they split the special stat into special attack and special defense. Whew. I know I just went through a laundry list, but it's worth mentioning a lot of these came in the second generation, and like you said a moment ago, Jay, it's kind of wild because some of these things, like the clock mechanic, it's so easy to think like, oh, that's somewhat new. No, like these were present in 2000. Crazy.
That's all Pokemon. Like that's all like integral to a Pokemon experience, as far as I'm concerned. Like that's all like every single one of those things, and to have that many mechanics introduced in a single generation is kind of buck wild, but all of those, I mean, like the breeding is like, it is so much fun to be able to just like send your Pokemon away to like train at a special gym for however long and come back and they're swole from the daycare. And then also, hey, here's an egg. And it's like, you at that age, you don't have the internet to be able to comprehend what's going to come out of that egg, right? And so just the wonder of all that those things helped instill, and then mechanically, getting the game more solid, right? Introducing new types, splitting up the defensive stats, that are just like flesh out the JRPG elements while also fleshing out the collectathon and just how cool Pokemon were, and to be able to engross you in that world, even if like the story is paper thin, the world is still incredible.
Yeah, it really is. And the reason that if it seems to you as you're listening like, oh wow, they sure did add like a ton to this second gen, you would be right to think that, because they originally were going to stop after Gen 2. They went all out. That's why Gen 2 feels so final in a way. They added tons of new systems. You can go back. It is the only game, I think, with the exception of maybe like, Black 2 and White 2 or the Ultra Sun or whatever. It was one of the only games that is a direct sequel. It takes place, I think, 3 years after the first one. And you get to go back to the entirety of the first game. Even if it's not, perfect, you can go back to every single spot, challenge all the gym leaders, challenge the Elite Four. So this was going to be the last one, but then they saw how much money they were making, and they said, "Oh no!
Oh no!
We're gonna milk this." Another important thing to mention that they added were 100 new Pokemon. This was wild to us as kids. I remember the reveal for me and my friend group came with the Pokemon movie. At the beginning of the Pokemon movie, they had like a little short, kind of like they do with like Pixar, and in that short, we saw Togepi, Meryl, and Donphan, all for the first time. And I remember seeing that movie 2 or 3 times in theaters, and it just blew my mind because, like, to us as kids, we had 151. Like, we knew about Mew at that point, and it was, like, insane that they were going to add 100 more, and it was in color, and you could get you got new starters, and you could get the old starters, too. Absolutely wild. It was insane. And they've largely continued doing this with each new iteration. They're adding new Pokemon, 100 give or take. I don't know, man. Do you know how many they're up to at this point?
I know they're over 1,000 because I remember reading about the 1,000th Pokemon in the Pokédex, and it being some sort of celebration of there being more than 1,000 Pokemon. It's some sort of like gold or medallion Pokemon that you have to like have a certain amount of gold to get or something, or to evolve or something like that. But yeah, all I know is it's more than 1,000.
Oh, it is literally just a little guy that is encased in gold, and his name is Goldango.
There you go. Thanks for doing the research there.
Yeah, I could name the original 151 no problem. I think I could name up through Gen 2. Gen 3 is where it starts to get spotty. Beyond that, I don't know. I know a couple here and there.
Yeah, I think for sure Gen 1 I could almost certainly name. Gen 2 would probably be a little tougher than me than Gen 3, because Gen 3 was like my initial, like, that's hard coded into my brain as far as like names and things goes. And like those two generations I would have a hard time like differentiating between. And then Gen 4 things get a little dicey, and then after that it's no way. Absolutely no way. If you show me pictures, maybe. I know there's a really dumb, the one that frustrates me the most is the vanilla Pokemon. I hate the vanilla.
Oh, I like
Pokemon.
that one.
No, Rick. No.
You mean the vanilla ice cream cone, right?
Yes, I mean the vanilla ice cream cone. The one that
I
just
love using that
the
little
one
guy.
that just turns into a double scoop and triple scoop of vanilla ice cream.
Come on, that's awesome.
Okay, please
it's better than
please, just please don't tell me you like the ones that just it's gears and it's called Clang. Just please.
Oh no, that's a little lazy.
Okay,
I don't like those.
Please. Thank you.
I mean, look, I'll take a sentient ice cream cone over another knockoff Pidgey any day of the week.
You know what? I'll give you that. I'll give you that. Yeah.
So Gen 2 obviously wasn't the final generation. We went pretty quickly into Gen 3 and then Gen 4, which is kind of where we're going to land on today. Let's talk about the meat of today's discussion, HeartGold and SoulSilver. So these were the second remakes of Pokemon games that we got. The first remakes came in Gen 3, and they were Fire Red and Leaf Green, a remake for the Game Boy Advance of Gen 1. Those games in particular have a huge soft spot for me. They have always been my favorite in the series. I think they still might be, but I did like playing this one quite a bit. HeartGold and SoulSilver, though, they were remakes of Gen 2, taking place in Gen 4, and they were released in Japan in September of 2009, and then everywhere else in the world got them in March of 2010. And that was for the Nintendo DS. That was the first Pokemon game. Well, Gen 4 was the first Pokemon games on the DS, so no longer in Game Boy Land. These two added a bunch of new features, and we're not going to get into all of them today, but I did want to shout out this frankly incredible video on YouTube by a channel called Cow Food Yum. Great name. And the title of the video is The Perfect Remake, HeartGold and SoulSilver. And in that video, Cow Food Yum just goes over everything in these remakes with a fine-tooth comb. And if you're really looking for like, and I'm talking about differences down to like different trainer battles in specific routes. So if you're looking for that level of detail, I highly recommend that YouTube video because we're not going to get that granular today. But some new features that I thought would be cool to talk about would be you can now have the first Pokemon in your party follow you in the world map, kind of like in Pokemon Yellow.
I will never fully understand why this was so important to me, but when they didn't have this in future generations, so disappointing. Like,
it's a bit of a bummer.
Yeah, but I think this just like was one small thing where I could turn around, press the A button, talk to my Pokemon, see how they're feeling. And I felt like it was dynamic too. Like if they're in the yellow health bar, red health bar, then they're not happy. And like it just genuinely made the world more immersive, for all these pixels on a mobile device. Like it just it added so much, and I genuinely, it's one of my favorite parts.
One other neat thing, when your Pokemon are following you, if you go into a store, let's say you're taking your big ol' Steelix with you and you want to go into a Pokemon Center, that big boy can't fit in there. So they go back into their Pokeball and you get to see the little animation. That's pretty cool. And then if you're walking, let's say with a Krabby, and you get them to use Surf, you get to see them hop in the water. And granted, it's not like super detailed. It's still just the sprite work, just jumping into the water. But that's still a really nice touch for what you're doing.
Yeah, and I couldn't quantify my appreciation for them when I was younger and playing them for the first time, but that was one thing that did stick out to me this time that I was like, oh, hey, that's really cool. I like that, and I like felt I did say that to myself quite a few times, like replaying it in the recent weeks. And so, it's just really genuinely some great details in there.
One other neat thing that they added in the game, and I'll be perfectly honest, I did not engage with this on this playthrough, I just read about it, is the Pokeathlon. Did you do much of this at all, Jay?
Yes, I did that on this playthrough as well. I stumbled upon it.
All right, I'm gonna stand up and go get a coffee. Jay, take it over. You're the new host. I'll see you guys back in like 15 minutes.
The Pokeathlon was fun. It was it's just another thing that they did that nobody asked them to do. Like nobody, was asking, pleading for this, but they put it in there anyways. And like, you just, you take your Pokemon and you take them through little track and field games. And I mean, it's hilarious and just like genuinely I was surprised even this time how competitive I was getting and how many taps I could get in on my DS. And, then realizing afterwards, maybe I shouldn't try so hard for the sake of preservation of my 3DS. But yeah, like, if you don't know what this is, like, you're definitely missing out. It was one of those things where, just like the casino I mentioned earlier to get my Dratini, it was one of those things that I'd spend a surprising amount of time on. But yeah, you just tap faster to get your Pokemon to run around the track faster. You swipe and you get them to move and run faster, and you can run them into competitors' Pokemons and things like that. And it was just fun seeing, your battling Pokemon turn into track stars, for lack of a better term. It was just fun. Not enough to make an entire game out of, although I think Game Freak might try to do that today in the form of a mobile game. But at that time, it was just a part of the experience, and you didn't have to engage with it whatsoever. They didn't drag you down if that wasn't your jam, but it was a good time for me.
Given the success of Pokemon Stadium, I'm kind of surprised that these weren't in Gen 3 even, right? Because those very well could have been mini games in Pokemon Stadium 1 or 2, and those games were fairly successful, if I'm remembering right. I mean, we love them anyway. I don't know about critically. So I'm kind of shocked that they weren't in Gen 3. Gen 3, from just purely shooting from the hip here from memory, they did have the style contest or the beauty contest or whatever it was called.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I engaged with those a little bit, and those were enjoyable for their own reasons, but at the end of the day, you were still using the same moves, which was cool, but also a bit boring, because, it kind of felt battle adjacent, whereas like the Pokeathlon was really its own minigame, was its own thing separate from battling. And so, yeah, but one side note about the Pokeathlon, it was great catching legendaries, who are these epic Pokemon and amazing in battles, and then seeing their like tiny chibi forms basically running around a track. It was just hilarious. But last side note about the Pokeathlon.
Well, I did have another question about that. Now that we're talking about like the contests from Gen 3, one of my big memories from that was always trying to get a Phoebus to have. I think one of the stats was beauty, to have its beauty as high as possible, because then it would evolve into a melodic. And in that way, the contest kind of tied into the grander world of Pokemon. Is the Pokeathlon the same, or is it really segmented into its own sort of thing?
I believe you earn points, or you earn a separate type of currency that you can spend at the Pokeathlon to be able to earn things, but I don't think it's anything significant, or your Pokemon don't earn stats or in any sort of category to be able to evolve or anything like that. Wish they did. That'd be cool.
There is another thing that was unique to HeartGold and SoulSilver, and I actually cannot speak to this because I never had these games when they were contemporary. And good luck finding them today and paying under $100. And that's just for the cartridge, not for a CIB copy. RIP to all of my DS collector friends. But I'm talking about the Pokewalker, of course. The Pokewalker was a physical companion to the game. It was shaped like a little Pokeball. And honestly, fans of Digimon or Tamagotchi would probably be familiar with these because they behaved similarly. You could take the Pokewalker with you and you could shake it to sort of like walk, quote unquote, with your Pokemon. You could train them that way. But again, I've never used one of these, so I can't speak fully to it. Did you have one of these when they were new?
Yes, I did, and I I put a Pokemon in there, and then forgot about it, and then
Oh no.
no, not great. I felt so bad finding it years later and turning it on, and there was a Pokemon in there. I can't remember what it was, but
It's got 5 o'clock shadow. It's got sadness in its eyes.
It's smoking a cigarette, like just not having it. Like, oh man, yeah, no. So I remember it, and I genuinely wish I had, but. No, I think it was one of those things that my child brain just forgot about, and I found it as a young adult and was disappointed in my younger self.
And to be fair, I think they did do away with this. I don't think future generations had physical things that went with it. I think, if I'm remembering correctly, Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee had physical I don't want to call them add-ons, but like physical companion things that could interact with the game. But, your mainline entries, your Scarlets and Violets, your Swords and Shields, they're not going to have the Pokewalkers like we had back then. And I think that's a smart move. I can see why they were excited about it. It was this sort of early 2010s thinking that like an extra piece of technology was cool. And then everybody realized pretty quickly, like, actually, no, let's just contain everything into one thing and we'll call it the iPhone, one of those sorts of things.
Yeah, because you don't need a walker when you have Pokemon Go, right? Or what is it? Is it Pokemon Sleep? Pokemon, there's a new, do you know about this? Have you heard about this?
Have you heard about this? I've just seen the name Pokemon Sleep and like Battle Pass thrown around, but I haven't actually looked into it. I just learned about this actually like 3 hours before recording.
Yeah,
so I haven't looked into it.
Apparently, it's a Pokemon Sleep app, and Snorlax is going to help you get some Z's. Apparently, so yeah, but it's just it's just thinking about like outside media and additions, and my brain was instantly like, how can I get my Pokemon from my Switch into Pokemon Sleep? But they probably don't have that level of integration. Maybe they do. Maybe it'll surprise me.
I mean, you never know. I know there are YouTube tutorials of how to get like your Pokemon from Sword and Shield all the way, or maybe it's reverse, your Pokemon from like Ruby and Sapphire all the way up to Gold and Silver. Jesus. From Ruby and Sapphire all the way up to Sword and Shield. I've seen tutorials on how to do that, and it's really involved because, Sword and Shield to, I don't know, Shining Diamond, Brilliant Pearl, maybe not so difficult, but, going across multiple generations of hardware, yeah, then you're going to have to start doing convoluted steps. I've never tried it myself, but
No, I did this a lot. I transferred Pokemon from every generation. Like I still have the Pokemon that I used from those 3rd generation Game Boy Advance cartridges. Like those Pokemon are still in my Pokemon games. So yeah, I've been doing this for generations. And honestly, in my experience, it was way harder back then. Maybe it was because I was a dumb kid, but like you had to, there was one game where you transferred your Pokemon from one generation to another, and then you had to go catch them in like a safari zone.
Yeah, I think that was this one. I think that was HeartGold and SoulSilver, to where you could transfer them from Ruby and Sapphire, but then it was like a trade show or something where you had to like, it was like a show where you had to catch them doubly. It just seemed tedious to me.
Oh yeah, I hated it. I absolutely despised this process. But yeah, and then yeah, but it was to me, it was convoluted a lot more earlier in the process. I think today there's a Pokemon hub or an app or something that like you can download and put them all onto and then transfer them to the next game. Or like a Pokemon bank, maybe it's called, I think. But yeah.
I know the bank was a thing for a while. I don't know if it's still, or maybe it was called Pokemon Home. I only remember that because at some point I had bought one of the 3DS games, maybe X or Y, from GameStop, and whoever traded it in didn't delete anything, so I just got like a bunch of free Pokemon that I,
That
kept.
was the best. I did that. I bought so many pre-owned Pokemon games in my past, and finding that it wasn't deleted and like getting to see like a snapshot of where they were, and then of course stealing all of their Pokemon and transferring over to my game. That was a lot of fun.
So I want to talk a little more about how we personally felt about HeartGold and SoulSilver. But before I do, I found this quote from, I believe this was from Tajiri, talking about the process of remaking these games. And I wanted to read that before we start giving our own thoughts. Here's what he has to say. Quote, "The first thing that I knew that I needed to bear in mind was to respect the feelings of those people who'd played Gold and Silver 10 years before. I think the players have very strong memories of the game, so they'd think things like, this trainer is still strong, and if I do this here, this is going to happen. I knew I needed to respect those feelings. With HeartGold and SoulSilver, the way in which trainers and Pokemon relate has become a major theme, and this has been added to the story. We came up with the titles HeartGold and SoulSilver as we decided these were appropriate to express this theme." End quote. So he's sort of talking about the pragmatic notion of remaking a game with new versus old, and then the thematic elements of relations between Pokemon and the people playing the game, the trainers, us. And I thought that would be a good springboard into talking about what we did and didn't like about this game, just as a game and then also as a remake. So just after hearing that, Jay, do you have any thoughts immediately?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, talking from the perspective of like when I first played this, I genuinely feel like that was a goal that was accomplished. That it was a game that sticks out, as I said at the top of the show, and remains, despite whatever we talk about after this, is my favorite Pokemon game. The HeartGold SoulSilver was extremely influential in my taste in video games, period. And so like I feel the heart, I feel the soul that that they put into these remakes. I genuinely do.
Yeah, I can understand that. These aren't my favorites either. That still is, it's just always going to be Fire Red and Leaf Green for me. But you can tell that they put a lot of effort into really balancing the concessions for new fans to make this feel like a brand new game, as well as keeping things recognizable for the old fans. And as far as remakes go, the remake that I always think of when I think of remake done perfectly is Spyro, the Reignited trilogy. I think those remakes are spectacular. I think these are like one tier below. It's like they really didn't do anything wrong with these. I mean, there are parts of the game that I don't like, but I think that's more just this is a game than it is this is a remake. Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, the issues I had with it this time around didn't stem at all from it being a remake. It was, it was more integral to the actual game experience itself rather than like a remake. And yeah, no, I also very much appreciate the Spyro shout out.
Oh yeah, dude. Those are fantastic games. I love them. One of the things that I noticed here, we talked about the EXP and that sort of concession. I don't think it was implemented in the way that it ultimately became at this point in time. I think that came with the next one, or maybe with X and Y or Black and White. I can't quite remember. But that combined with the battle speed did make this game feel excruciatingly slow to play. I played this time on my 3DS. I legally bought the game, is what I'm going to say on air. You can you can believe me or not. But I did not play on an emulator, is all that I'm trying to say. So I could not speed up grinding. And grinding is something I want to put a pin into and come back to in just a moment. But the pace of play in this is so slow. It's so slow. And Jay, I'm sure you agree with me, but it made this a bit of a slog to get through, especially as somebody that I hate when one of my Pokemon is much stronger than the rest. I like everybody to be within 1 or 2 levels of each other. And I like to have 2 teams going. So having to grind individual Pokemon as a 30-year-old, this sucked, dude. And I would put on podcasts, and I got a lot of podcast listening done preparing for this show, because as good as the music is, I mean, you can only hear that Pokemon battle theme so many times before you start to glaze over. Man, it was a bit of a slog. I can see, you're kind of shaking your head for those that aren't looking at you. I'm guessing you agree.
I agree. I hate that I agree, but I agree. This is the conflict that's been going on in my brain, is because it was more of a chore. There were definitely moments that were a lot of fun, and the challenges that I self-implemented on myself made the game more challenging, and genuinely at moments I had to think, and that's fun. I like thinking about tactics. I like thinking about strategy. Tactics and strategy games are some of my favorite of all time. And so that was an enjoyable part of it, but man, I avoided every battle I could in this game. It was you can only face so many trainers with the same Pokemon that you're gonna beat. And I was avoiding a lot of battles, and I was still cleaning house a lot of the time. It just and I was trying to, podcast it up all the time, and try to, but it just, and it was a good podcasting game for a good while, but it just didn't quite hold me the same way it used to, and that's disappointing. But I'm trying to interrogate, is that adulthood? Is that because I just don't have the time, and because I'm sitting there playing Pokemon, and I'm thinking about, I've got so many games I need to play now. This entire last month, I've had Jurassic World Evolution 2 downloaded on my PS5 because I got it for free. It's a game I've wanted for a long time. Super excited to play it, and I haven't gotten to pick it up yet. And so it just, it was killer. It was killer, man.
And it's a two-pronged kind of thing, because as kids, we didn't notice this. But at the same time, we weren't exposed to things like emulators where you could speed the play up, or other JRPGs that might have a faster pace of play. At least, my circles weren't. So as kids, did we not mind because it wasn't a big deal, or did we not mind because we didn't know any better? It's hard to say. And I'd be curious to talk to, folks like Colby, who wrote in saying, he wasn't alive when Gen 2 was current. So going back to play, I think he mentioned it was a little bit difficult. And Dave echoed much of the same thing. And Dave, I believe he said he was 13 when this came out. So it is tough, man. I agree with you. And I think, I was a bit of the opposite. I was hitting every single trainer, but avoiding wild Pokemon battles a lot of the time. I don't remember the town, but it's that one Team Rocket hideout that you go in where Lance is helping fight with you, and then you go downstairs.
Yep.
And then there's the Persian cat statues that that automatically trigger trainer battles. At first, I was like, "Oh, this is great! I'm gonna EXP up like crazy." And then the reality set in, and I was like, "Oh no, this is actually just really tedious. I need to find the off switch for this like immediately."
Yeah, no, I think I think part of it is that, one, as a kid, you got more time, right? And then one, as a kid, it's new, like Pokemon in the grand scheme of things, like, was still relatively new. And I wasn't super familiar with Gen 2, like if I played those games, it was very briefly. And so, like, getting to play these remakes fairly fresh, I think was huge, for me personally. And then the thing that I thought about when I was playing it is, like, I genuinely would have loved to, like, in my adult brain was like, I should have started this the same time as somebody else too. And then we meet up and battle each other every week or something like that, and like build like a in-person rivalry, like that, like that's kind of like what I want, because like your rival in the game, like, I felt no connection, like it just wasn't there, because it was very, straightforward. It was very basic, and it was just, they're your rival because they're your rival, right? Whereas like if it was a buddy of mine and we're trading back and forth and battling all the time, like then like you can build shared experiences, and like like there's no at that age of Pokemon, like you have like that's what you had. Whereas now, like, I can play with anybody in the world with any game at any time. It's a entirely different landscape, entirely different expectations for what video games can provide. And, and I really, it pains me to say all this, but like, yeah, it was a slog, and it just, I think it's just plain outdated.
Yeah, in some ways, it certainly is. That's a strong word to use, outdated, but I don't think you're using it carelessly. Examining a game that means a lot to you, especially one that meant a lot to you as a kid, it can be tough to examine that critically. And, sometimes things don't hold up. It doesn't mean that you have to stop liking it, but I mean, it's like you parsed out. The fact of the matter is that a lot of this game's pace of play is incredibly slow. And the battle mechanics too, which I don't think we talked about too in depth. And I do apologize, listeners. I know we're kind of glazing over a lot of this and talking, like we've explained this before. It's just Pokemon is so ubiquitous. Count that as a flaw on my part. If you're upset, I do apologize. But the battle system itself, the battle mechanics, it's not overly deep. They certainly improved upon it from Gen 1 to Gen 2, to be fair. Stab, the same type attack bonus is now a thing. People started learning what EVs were. EVs, the layman explanation of that, is just Pokemon that are trained are going to be stronger than Pokemon that are caught in the wild, right? So if you catch a level 3 Pidgey, train it to level 20, it's going to be more powerful than a level 21 Pidgey you just catch in the wild. That's all that is. But beyond that, beyond basic typing, and, some AI improvements, which to be fair, they did do, the battle system is not overly complex. It is very straightforward. Kids continue to get by to this day with move sets that are just all attack moves, right? You don't have to think all the time about buffs and debuffs. You just don't have to outside of competitive play. Huge asterisk there. But again, we're not going to go into it. And all of this kind of combines together to make this very slow experience. And on one hand, you do have to remember these are targeted to children. But on the other hand, as, gamer Americans, as I've heard it said, we're examining this as a video game, and it holds up to any other JRPG, but there are points of friction that we have to identify. It sucks. It's tough, but you got to do it.
Yeah, I think that's the important thing, is that I will say that overall, this might be the last go that I ever give, this Pokemon game. This experience just was genuinely overall not great. But I cannot emphasize enough how much that doesn't take away from how great I do think this game actually is, and especially in the context of the time that it came out. I think that genuinely, I like it. In a world where I get to expose like Pokemon to like my child or to like another young person, this is probably the first, Pokemon game that I would have them play, because, like, this truly, introduces the best possible version of introducing all of those Gen 2 mechanics that you were talking about. And I think that, like, this is like a great, like, frame of reference. Like, I would love to, put a DS into a kid's hands and say, like, this is, if that's where you're starting with Pokemon, I think that's like a great place to start. And I think that a kid would genuinely still have a great time playing this game and grinding all that stuff out, because, like, I did have a good time with that. And so, I think that I'm going to say all that, that I didn't have a great time with this game now. It doesn't take away from any of the good times that I had with this in the past.
See, I'm the opposite. I would give them my black brick original Game Boy and a copy of Pokemon Blue and just say, have at it, sport. Suffer through it like we did.
See, I don't want to scare them off, because, like, I don't want to push them too far. So, but maybe that's my bias. Like, of course, it's early enough that I can rationalize it, and still, it's still my favorite game. So, but yeah, or it might just hurt that much more when they don't like Pokemon at all.
Yeah. No, you're exactly right. This is a terrific place for newcomers to start. And, while I agree with you, this was a bit of a slog to get through this time. And if I'm being honest, I'm probably not going to play it again. That being said, I still think, like, I would play this game over Sword and Shield, over Scarlet Violet every day of the week. Every day of the week. It's not even close. And I don't think it takes away, even though there are genuine criticisms against this game, I still think these two are among the best in the series. And that's a popular opinion. Fans largely consider HeartGold and SoulSilver to be the best in the entire mainline series. Critically, the games did quite well. They scored around an A+, A-, like high 80s, low 90s out of 100, that kind of thing. The major criticisms were really the lack of brand new material and the feeling that the games were, quote, a gap filler to make the wait for new Pokemon game just a little more bearable. That comes from IGN. But I've got to side with the fans on this one. I really think HeartGold and SoulSilver are the best Pokemon games out there. I played Sword and Shield in 2021. I did not have a good time. I liked that they did away with random encounters. I think that is universally good across all JRPGs forever, even if some of my all-time favorites have them. But other than that, I'll play these any day of the week.
Yeah, I have not played a lot of the recent Pokemon games. I think the last generation that I played might be X and Y, actually. I think that might be as far back as it goes, and I remember having a good time with them, but it became, as I ventured out of childhood and into adulthood, I think it just became tough to rationalize spending money on Pokemon games at that point. I remember, I think X and Y came out right before I went to college, and I think that was a big reason why I ended up dropping off of them. But yeah, like I have really had no interest in going back to Pokemon. I 100% got a lot of friends that still play Pokemon that will still, swear by the games and have a lot of fun with them. And I, more power to them. It's just not in my wheelhouse right now. And that's okay. But, I'm very open to, jumping back into the newer Pokemon experience, but just not right now.
One last thing that I wanted to talk about before we sort of wrap up is just the music. Pokemon music is very well known. Composer Junichi Masuda has been the longtime collaborator with Pokemon. There certainly are others that are credited, like Go Ichinose and Shota Kageyama on HeartGold and SoulSilver specifically. But Junichi Masuda's name is always first. Hitomi Sato is another one that I'm seeing here. Masuda's name is always first. Pokemon music is, I don't know anybody that dislikes it. And sound too, not just the music, but the sound. It tends to veer towards more upbeat and chipper music, largely because of the limitations of the hardware at the start of the franchise, I would imagine. But that's not to say they don't get dramatic. Specifically in HeartGold and SoulSilver, I think the soundtrack is really terrific. I think it's really well done. It takes advantage of what the 3DS can do, or the regular DS, I suppose, can do perfectly well. I love the Pokemon Center theme in this one. I love so many of the themes in this one are just all-time classics for me, especially the battle with Red.
Whew. All-time great. Holy smokes. Like, the boss battle, like, I mean, anytime you face the Elite Four, the Final Four, the gym battle bosses, like, were always, like, but Red, holy smokes, just incredible.
It's a reorchestration of the original battle theme.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just incredible. And, you know, we kind of skipped over that just because that's how the conversation went. But it's worth noting that that felt like the most incredible climax to the game that you could ask for. Because remember, this is set 3 years after Red, Blue, and Yellow. So you get to go back to Kanto and see the ramifications of everything. Team Rocket's gone. I believe Cinnabar Island is kind of messed up from a volcano. You get to see the passage of time and how things have grown. You know, all the gym leaders that you get to face, they're all stronger. But then you get to this optional Mount Silver. Well, I don't know that it's truly optional, but you don't have to fight Red for sure. And if you go to the very top, you see the protagonist from the anime, or not from the anime, from the manga, and from the first game. And he doesn't talk because you're a silent protagonist. And it is far and away the hardest fight in the game. I'm talking like high 80s level Pokemon.
It's tough. Like, I remember, you know, like, as a kid, like, and I smoked everything as a kid, you know, because, like, I, you know, leveled up my Pokemon, like, because I had 100 hours to be able to do so, and I grinded like crazy, and then I hit Red, and I had to go grind some more, you know, like, I had to turn my ass around and get good to be able to go and face Red. I think that Pikachu is level 90, I think. Like, holy crap. You know, like, just seeing that number on the other side of the screen was unimaginable. You know, like, it's just, and man, it lives up. It's such a good boss battle.
Yeah, the Elite Four doesn't even come close. Like,
No.
Red is a good 10 plus levels above the hardest Elite Four member. It's just a spectacular thing to see because, like, you're coming fresh off of this wildly successful game to the sequel, and suddenly you're facing yourself from the first one. It's mind blowing, and nothing made you feel like more of a hero, like taking him down, and it's great. It's so cool. I didn't get to do it on this run. I just did not have the time. But I did make sure that I watched it on YouTube. I watched a couple, and man, the music is terrific. The battle is just epic. It's what a way to go. What a way to go. I mean, they could have. I'm glad they didn't end the series here, but had they ended the series at Gold and Silver, would have been the best one to end it at.
Could you imagine, like, Pokemon being this, like, this strange anomaly of, like, back-to-back games, you know, back from, like, the late 90s, you know, early 2000s. Like, just, you remember that amazing optional boss battle that they ended on and just stopped? like it would be mythic, you know? Like, I can't imagine the status that it would have in, like, the video game community right now if that was the case. But yeah, obviously they kept going. Obviously making a ton of money, making a lot of good games. But yeah, like, that moment right there, that's an all-timer, not just in Pokemon. Like, that's an all-time video game moment.
Oh yeah, I agree completely. Nothing more needs to be said. Man, I mean, with that, I think we could start wrapping it up. I had a great time playing this and visiting it for the show. This was my first time, by the way, playing HeartGold, which was the version that I played. Never played this specific version before. That's why I wanted to make it the first mainline on this show. And because it's widely thought to be the best one. Am I going to play it again? No. I enjoyed my experience. I get it. I appreciate it. And I'm done.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. Obviously I played it when I was a kid, so like this isn't my first time around, but yeah, no, I'd recommend it if you've never played Pokemon and like you're willing to like go out and get it by whatever legal means that you find necessary. Like I definitely recommend doing so. It and even if not to play through the whole thing, just like historically, if like you're interested in like video games of the past, then like this is a great one to like dive into and check out a little bit. Maybe not necessarily like make your way through the whole thing, but yeah, no, HeartGold, SoulSilver, all-time greats. Didn't love this playthrough. Maybe not going to play it ever again. But man, just still has just a deeply special place in my heart.
Yeah, very well said. I definitely recommend playing it too. Absolutely. We would never recommend you go to Vim's Lair where you could find ROMs and emulation. We would never recommend going to Retro Game Core on YouTube, an amazing channel, and looking up the hacked 3DS guide. We wouldn't recommend that because we're stand-up guys here. We wouldn't recommend how easy it is to hack a 3DS and have this game at your fingertips and save $120.
We're standing up right now. Me and Rick, we can't see our video. We are standing at our desks right now. That's what stand-up guys we are. So like you can trust us.
It's true. It's very true. And those are nice boxers, by the way. I did notice those whenever we first started.
You like them? You see the Pokeballs? I got Ultra Balls here.
Oh, is that what we're calling them these days? Okay. Jay, I got to thank you, man. This is your first time on the show, but I really hope it's not the last. This was so much fun. And now that we're reaching the end of the episode, I want to give you a space to talk about your really terrific show, Super Bracket Bros. Maybe even talk about your brand new-ish Discord too, of which I am a member. And I also like to ask my guests too, once you're done, pitching your show and talking about it, recommend a great starting episode for new listeners. So with that jumbled explanation, the floor is yours. Tell us all about Super Bracket Bros.
So first off, thanks for having me on. This was a great introduction to Pixel Project Radio. So definitely thank you so much for inviting me on this episode. I had a genuinely great time and great discussion. If you want to catch up with Super Bracket Bros is the podcast where we take fictional characters from across the multiverse and pit them against each other. So right now, at the time of this recording, we are in the middle of our Kaiju tournament. So this is season 5 of the show. So you have a ton of backlog to be able to sort through, to be able to find your favorite characters. But right now we're talking characters like Godzilla, we've got King Ghidorah, King Kong, but we've also got the likes of like Calamity Ganon, we've got Fury Bowser in there, we've got a few video game characters, we've got some anime in there. On Super Bracket Bros, we truly try to take the truest version of the multiverse, right? And take characters from everywhere that we can and pit them against each other. So how it works is each episode is a single match in a bracket. So right now we have 16 fighters, and that's going to make up our entire season. But each episode is an individual match. And so right now, if you just want to listen to the newest thing that's going on, then start with season 5. You can start with our Selection Sunday episode of each season, where we kind of explain the concept of what we're doing. We talk about the seeding and how we arrived at those numbers for each of our characters and sort of how we got to that point. So if you're looking to start fresh from a new season perspective, find a Selection Sunday episode. Or if you don't really care about the overarching nature of Super Bracket Bros, then just find a character that you like. So find a character that means a lot to you. I think that would be a great place to start, and kind of get a frame of reference of how we talk about characters. And we're not hyper competitive. It's a very discussion based show. We're looking to have a good time. This is the epitome of this is the podcast form of you as a kid taking your action figures and banging them against each other. That's what we're trying to accomplish on Super Bracket Bros, and we would love to, if you gave us a try. And if you find our most recent episode, you can find a link to our brand new Discord server where you can get all sorts of fun updates. We are posting episode releases, and it's a great place to talk about, and you can talk to me. You can at me, or you can at me in Rick's Discord too, so either way, hit me up.
Now, do you have a favorite character that's appeared on the show?
Do I have a favorite character that's appeared on the show? Lucario has been on the show back in season 1. I don't know if I'd recommend going back that far, but we've had a lot of really fun characters. Bumblebee, Danny Phantom have been on the show. We've had Link back during season 1. It would be tough to pick a favorite, but those are some highlights.
One of the ones from the Kaiju season, I believe, is Sin from Final Fantasy X.
Yes.
Which is a very interesting choice to include. I can't remember if that episode has come out yet or not.
Yeah, we had Dave Jackson on that episode, who we talked about previously. Yeah, so Dave was on for Sin versus Vagar from House of Dragons, and we'll be spoiler alert, talking about Sin again. So yeah.
Oh, well, there you go. Sorry if we spoiled that for anybody that was hopeful to hear that one.
Well, stick around for the journey. It's all about the journey.
Yeah, it could. Listen, it could be ranked. It could be a ranked choice bracket. You don't know. You're not a listener, so go listen. Go figure it out for yourself. And you can find links to Super Bracket Bros in the episode description. I will make sure that those are there, whether it's just for their Linktree or website or Discord. Check in there and you'll find them. You'll also find links to our socials in the episode description, as you find them in every episode description. You can join our Discord, you can follow us on Instagram and Twitter, and I guess Threads now too. This is the first episode that we're recording after the release of Threads, and for better or for worse, we are on that website. So come check us out on Twitter at home, is what it basically is. You can also find a link to our Patreon. If you really like what we do and you want to help support us, you can find us there. That link is www.patreon.com/pixelprojectradio, $2 a month. That's it. That's all you need, and you'll get a bunch of goodies, extra episodes, etc. But what I wanted to talk about now, real quick before we end, are ratings and reviews. Certainly, if you're a fan of Jay's show, please do go rate and review. That really helps us out a lot as podcasters. But on this show, on Pixel Project Radio, I like to read all of the reviews that we get, and we got a couple in now. So I wanted to read one here as we sign off for the day. And this is from Discord member and podcaster Jala from Jala-chan's Place. And here's what she says. 5 stars, by the way. Here's what she says. Thoughtful, well-presented game analysis. Rick is a thoughtful, evocative host. Thank you. Who handpicks some truly fabulous guests. I agree there. And also presents insightful solo essays on deeper elements of the chosen game. Concepts are clearly and concisely delivered. There's a lot of thought and heart behind this podcast. Highly recommend, and that's 5 stars. Thank you, Jala. I appreciate that very much. It's kind of bizarre. I learned of Jala through another show on a podcasting network that was my biggest influence when I first started. I'll just leave it at that. So when Jala joined the server and when we started talking, it was like talking with a celebrity. I was like, Jala's talking to me? Like, what? It was wild. It was really, really cool. But Jala-chan's Place is an excellent podcast. It is more of a variety podcast where they talk about like real life issues like body dysmorphia and sexuality, Agatha Christie books, and video games as well. So I highly recommend, after you're done checking out us and Pixel Project Radio, us and Super Bracket Bros, check out Jala-chan's Place. There's a lot of really genuinely good stuff over there too. And once again, thank you, Jala. So, I feel like I've been talking forever. I guess that's what podcasting is, huh?
It's a heavy burden on our podcasters' shoulders.
Yes, we are the Sisyphean gods of spoken word entertainment. That's for sure. But Jay, once again, thank you so much for joining me. This was an absolute blast visiting a very beloved franchise and a very beloved game. Folks listening, thank you for sticking around. Again, check the episode description for all of your links to Super Bracket Bros and Pixel Project Radio. And for now, much like Entei, much like Reiku, and Suicune, I'm running away. be pretty funny if I just ended it there. I am Rick, as always, signing off. Thank you so much for listening. We'll catch you next time.